What is reality? Asking what reality is might be one of the deepest questions we can explore. At its most basic level, reality is everything that exists, not just what we can see, hear, or touch, but also the forces, particles, and laws that shape the universe. When we speak of reality, we mean what is truly there, whether we understand it fully or not. But there's an important distinction: reality itself versus how we perceive it. Our brains receive signals, light, sound, texture, and construct an inner model of the outside world. That model feels real, but it's only a version shaped by our senses. For example, dogs can hear sounds beyond our range, and bees see ultraviolet light. Their realities differ from ours, filtered through their biology, just as ours is. This means our experience of the world is never the complete picture. Optical illusions reveal this clearly. In the Muller-Lyer illusion, two lines of the same length appear different because our brains add meaning that isn't truly there. Perception bends what we believe to be reality. On top of sensory limits, we also overlay beliefs, memories, and expectations. If you hear footsteps behind you at night, your mind quickly fills the gaps with fear and assumptions, making the experience feel more real than it may actually be. Scientists work to study reality by removing as much human bias as possible. Yet, even science evolves. Newton's laws seemed absolute until Einstein's theory of relativity redefined them. Reality itself doesn't change, but our understanding of it continues to grow. What existed before existence? At first, the question sounds like a paradox. How can there be anything before existence itself? Yet it's one of the deepest puzzles in both physics and philosophy. When we talk about existence, we usually mean the universe, space, time, matter, and energy. So it feels natural to ask, what came before all of that? The problem is that time itself is part of the universe. If time didn't exist yet, then the idea of before may not even apply. It's like asking, what's north of the North Pole? The concept simply breaks down. According to the Big Bang Theory, the universe began as an incredibly hot, dense point that rapidly expanded. That expansion didn't happen in space. It created space. It didn't happen during time. It created time. Which means that before the universe might be a meaningless phrase. Still, scientists and philosophers have proposed intriguing ideas about what could lie beyond that boundary. Some suggest the universe emerged from a quantum vacuum, not empty space, but a strange, fluctuating field full of energy. It's not exactly something in the usual sense, but it isn't pure nothingness either. Others imagine our universe as just one bubble in a vast multiverse, where countless other universes exist with their own timelines and rules. In that case, ours might not be the first or the only. There are also cyclic models, where the universe goes through endless phases of expansion and contraction. Each cycle gives rise to a new version of space and time, stretching the idea of a beginning into something eternal. So while we can't say with certainty what, if anything, existed before existence, the question forces us to confront the limits of language and understanding. It asks whether anything can truly exist without space and time, or whether those very ideas are tied to the universe we're already in. Did the universe have a beginning? Stars, planets, and galaxies all had to come from somewhere. So the big question is, did the universe itself have a beginning? The most widely accepted scientific answer is yes. According to the Big Bang Theory, the universe began about 13.8 billion years ago from an unimaginably hot and dense state. From there, space expanded rapidly. As it cooled, particles formed atoms, and those atoms became the building blocks of everything we see today. But here's where things get tricky. The Big Bang wasn't an explosion in space. It was the expansion of space itself. Before it, there was no space, no time, and no before in the way we usually understand it. Still, not all scientists agree this was the absolute beginning. Some suggest the Big Bang may have only been the start of our observable universe, not of existence itself. There are models where the universe cycles endlessly through expansion and contraction. Other theories point to the possibility of a multiverse, where different universes each have their own beginnings. Quantum physics adds another layer. Some theories propose the universe could have emerged from a quantum vacuum, a kind of mathematical nothing, that isn't truly nothing at all, but a restless state full of energy governed by strange rules we're still trying to understand. Even with these ideas, the truth remains uncertain. We can study what happened shortly after the Big Bang, but whether there was a true first moment, or whether existence has always been in some form, remains a mystery. The deeper we explore, the more the boundary between physics and philosophy begins to blur. Why is there something rather than nothing? This is one of the hardest questions we can ask. By something, we mean everything: matter, energy, space, time, galaxies, planets, people, even thoughts. And by nothing, we don't just mean empty space. True nothingness would mean no space, no atoms, no time, not even a vacuum, just absolute absence. The mystery is that we don't really know why there's something. There's no obvious reason the universe had to exist. Logically, nothing seems simpler. It requires no rules, no energy, no structure. It just isn't. Some scientists and philosophers suggest the universe may have emerged from a quantum fluctuation, a tiny blip in a vacuum that produced particles, which then expanded into everything we see today. But that immediately raises another question. Where did the vacuum itself come from? And why were the laws of physics already there to allow it? Others propose that nothingness might be unstable, and that given enough time, something had to arise. But even that assumes time already existed, which leads back to the same problem. As soon as we imagine a cause or process, we're already assuming something. Another perspective is that perhaps nothing was never a real possibility. Maybe some form of existence is simply the default, not because of a reason, but because non-existence is impossible. It's not a fully satisfying answer, but it may be the closest we can get. This question doesn't just touch on science. It reaches beyond what science can measure. It reminds us how little we truly understand about why anything exists at all. Even the very tools we use to ask the question, logic, language, thought, are themselves part of this something we're trying to explain. Is anything truly real? A picture waking up from a dream so vivid it felt absolutely real, only to realize none of it ever happened. Now push that doubt further. How do we know we're not dreaming right now? This is one of philosophy's oldest and hardest questions. It isn't just about whether what we see is accurate. It's about whether anything at all exists the way we think it does. Every sensation, the sound in your ears, the feeling of your body, the sight of the world, could, in theory, be fabricated. Maybe you're just a brain in a lab, hooked up to electrical signals. Maybe you're inside a vast simulation. Or maybe everything exists only in your own imagination. Skeptical arguments like these don't necessarily deny reality. Instead, they challenge our ability to prove that reality is real. Pointing to a chair and saying, "There it is," isn't enough. After all, dreams and hallucinations can show you the same chair and feel just as convincing. Some philosophers have searched for an anchor, something undeniable that must be real, even if everything else is fake. Others argue that maybe we don't need absolute proof at all. If reality works, if it functions and allows us to live, it doesn't matter whether it's true in the ultimate sense. Still, the question lingers. We go through life trusting in solidity, yet deep down we can't completely shake the possibility that everything we know is part of one vast illusion, an illusion so seamless, it feels indistinguishable from truth. Was the universe meant to exist? The universe is here, that much is certain. But was it meant to be here? This isn't just a question about how it began. It's about whether its existence has a purpose, a direction, or some greater intention behind it. One reason people wonder about this is the universe's incredible precision. The laws of physics, the strength of gravity, the mass of fundamental particles. If any of these were even slightly different, stars, planets, and life itself might never have formed. This is known as the fine-tuning argument, which makes the universe seem as though it was perfectly set up for things to exist. Some see this as evidence of design. Others offer a different view, the multiverse theory. If countless universes exist, each with different rules, then it's not surprising that at least one of them, ours, happens to have the right conditions for life. In that case, no special intention is needed. There's also the scientific perspective that the universe doesn't require meaning at all. It may have emerged naturally, shaped by random fluctuations in physical laws, without any deeper purpose. From this angle, asking what the universe is meant for is like asking what a cloud is meant to do. It's simply the result of conditions coming together. In the end, whether the universe was meant to exist depends on what you believe meaning really is. Science can show us how things work, but the why may lie beyond its reach. Are thoughts really our own? We usually feel like our thoughts belong to us. You think something, and it seems to come from within. But if you look closer, the story is more complicated. Thoughts don't just arise out of thin air. They're shaped by your environment, culture, upbringing, and biology. Take language, for example. The words you know determine the concepts you can express. A person raised in one language might frame the same idea differently than someone raised in another. That shows how deeply thought is tied to context. Memory also plays a huge role. Much of what you think today is built from things you've already seen, heard, or experienced. When a song lyric or phrase suddenly pops into your mind, it feels spontaneous, but it's really your brain retrieving something stored long ago. Even beliefs often begin as ideas you were taught before you consciously chose them. Biology shapes thinking too. Hormones, brain chemistry, and even how well you've slept affect what kinds of thoughts show up. Clear thinking often comes when you're rested, while stress may trigger anxious or racing thoughts. In this way, thoughts happen in your mind, but they're not entirely under your control. They're sparked, filtered, and influenced by countless factors you didn't choose. You can reflect on them, challenge them, and decide how to respond, but the raw material of thought often comes from outside you. So while thoughts feel deeply personal, they're also part of a much larger exchange between your brain and the world around you. What is life? We recognize it instantly: a cat, a tree, a person, even a single bacterium. Yet when we try to define it precisely, the answer becomes surprisingly elusive. At its core, life is what sets the living apart from the non-living. Scientists often describe it with a checklist. Living things grow, reproduce, respond to their surroundings, use energy, and maintain internal balance, like regulating temperature or pH. Even the simplest bacteria meet these criteria. One of life's key hallmarks is the cell. Every known organism is either a single cell or a collection of them. Inside, intricate chemical processes unfold, transforming food into energy, copying DNA, repairing damage. These systems are organized and self-sustaining. Unlike something like fire, which also consumes fuel but can't regulate or repair itself. Evolution is another defining feature. Over generations, tiny genetic variations accumulate. Through natural selection, species adapt, giving rise to Earth's astonishing diversity, from insects to elephants. But even this picture has gray areas. Take viruses. They have genetic material but no cells, and they can't reproduce without a host. Some argue they aren't truly alive, while others see them as a borderline form of life. This ambiguity becomes even more pressing as we search for life beyond Earth. What if we find something that grows and adapts through chemistry but looks nothing like life as we know it? Would we call it alive? So while we can describe what life does, what life is remains partly unresolved, a unique interplay of biology, chemistry, and structure that sets it apart from everything else in the universe. Does suffering have a purpose? No one enjoys pain, whether it's loss, stress, or hardship, and yet every human experiences it. So, does suffering serve a purpose? From a biological perspective, suffering has a clear function. Physical pain signals danger or injury, keeping us from harmful actions like touching fire or straining a broken limb. Emotional pain works in much the same way, pointing to broken relationships, unmet needs, or unhealthy situations. In evolutionary terms, suffering helps us survive by pushing us to avoid threats and make necessary changes. But suffering isn't only about survival. It can also shape who we are. Many people report that difficult experiences taught them resilience, empathy, or a renewed appreciation for life. For instance, someone who recovers from a serious illness might begin valuing health, relationships, or time more deeply. Psychologists call this post-traumatic growth, the idea that hardship, while never desirable, can spark positive change in values, perspective, and inner strength, especially with support and healing. Across belief systems, suffering has often been linked to moral or spiritual growth. It's viewed as a test, a teacher, or a reminder of what truly matters. Even if not everyone shares this view, it reflects humanity's long effort to find meaning in pain. That said, not all suffering is beneficial. Chronic illness, oppression, or injustice may cause far more harm than growth. This is why the healthiest approach often involves both learning from hardship and working to reduce unnecessary suffering. In the end, suffering isn't a goal in itself, but it often leaves behind lasting effects, shaping how we grow, connect, and discover meaning, even in life's most difficult moments. Can one person change the world? It's a phrase we often hear. One person can change the world. But in a world of billions, shaped by complex systems, is that really possible? On a small scale, the impact of individuals is clear. A teacher can transform a student's future. A doctor can save a life. A single vote can sway a local election. These moments matter. But shifting the course of the entire world is a far greater challenge. History shows that individuals have sparked global change. Inventors like Thomas Edison and Marie Curie, activists like Martin Luther King Jr. and Malala Yousafzai, scientists like Albert Einstein, all reshaped how humanity lives, thinks, and organizes society. Yet none of them acted in isolation. Behind every famous figure stood networks of people, supporters, collaborators, and followers who carried their ideas forward. In truth, world-changing influence usually unfolds over time. One person may introduce a new idea, but it takes others to adopt it, refine it, and spread it. Movements, discoveries, and cultural shifts often begin with a spark, but they gain momentum only when many join in. Today, technology makes this potential even greater. A single voice can reach millions online. A single innovation can scale globally in record time. But the same tools that spread progress can also magnify misinformation or create unintended consequences. So, can one person change the world? Yes, but not alone. The real power lies not just in the initial action, but in how far an idea travels once it's released into the world, and in how many people choose to carry it forward. What is the self? We use the word self constantly. Yourself, myself, sense of self. But what does it really mean? The self is the idea of who you are. Not just your name or your job, but the deeper awareness that there's a you behind your thoughts, emotions, and choices. It's what gives you a stable identity across time, even as you grow, change, and adapt. At a basic level, the self includes your body, your memories, your personality, and your relationships. But it isn't just a list of traits. It's the way all those elements combine into a single perspective, a continuing sense of me that persists day after day. Psychologists often divide the self into two parts. The first is the experiencing self, the part of you that feels joy, sadness, pain, or sees colors and hears sounds in real time. The second is the narrative self, the ongoing story you tell about your life, including your past, your goals, and your place in the world. Neuroscience suggests this sense of self comes from a network of brain systems tied to memory, attention, and body awareness. When these systems are disrupted, a person's sense of identity can fracture, showing that the self isn't a single entity, but a collection of processes working together. Philosophers go even further, suggesting that the self might not be fixed at all. Instead, it could be more like a flowing stream, constantly shifting, yet still recognizable as the same river. So while we often speak of the self as something solid and enduring, in reality, it's an ongoing construction, woven from biology, memory, and experience, that creates the feeling of being someone. Is justice real? Justice is one of humanity's most fundamental principles. We believe people should be treated fairly, wrongs should be corrected, and everyone held to the same standards. But when we look closer, the question gets more complicated. Is justice truly real, or is it just an idea we've created? At its core, justice is about balance, giving people what they deserve, whether that means protection, punishment, opportunity, or recognition. Legal systems are built around this principle. Crime should bring consequences, and harm should be made right. In reality, though, justice is harder to define and even harder to achieve. Different cultures interpret fairness in different ways. In some, justice emphasizes punishment. In others, it means restoration or forgiveness. Even within one society, people often disagree on what a just outcome should look like. There's also a gap between the ideal of justice and how it actually functions. Wealth, bias, and power can shape outcomes. Two people may commit the same crime yet face very different consequences. In such cases, justice feels less like a guarantee and more like an aspiration. Some argue justice is simply a human construct, a framework we invented to reduce conflict and regulate behavior. Others see it as something deeper, a moral truth that exists beyond laws and customs. From this view, justice isn't just a system, but a standard of fairness we continually strive toward. So is justice real? In one sense, yes. It's a value, a shared expectation, and a force that shapes how societies function. But as a flawless, objective reality, justice is more of an ideal. It exists because people believe in it and work to bring it into being. Can there be right without wrong? We use ideas of right and wrong constantly when making choices, judging actions, or teaching values. But could the notion of right even exist without wrong to define it? At its core, right usually means fair, acceptable, or morally good, while wrong means the opposite, unfair, harmful, or unacceptable. The two concepts seem intertwined. We often recognize what's right only by knowing what counts as wrong. Without that contrast, the meaning of either becomes unclear. This relational pattern shows up in many areas: hot and cold, light and dark, up and down. Without cold, hot has little meaning. Similarly, without wrong, right might collapse into just normal or even become meaningless. Some philosophers view morality as a spectrum rather than a strict divide. Actions aren't simply right or wrong. They can fall somewhere in between, more fair or less harmful, more selfish or more kind. From this perspective, even minor wrongs help illuminate what better behavior looks like. Others argue that rightness can stand on its own, defined not by its opposite, but by its positive qualities. Acts that promote fairness, cooperation, kindness, or well-being are valuable in themselves. In this view, good doesn't require evil to have meaning. Still, in everyday life, right and wrong often come as a pair. People typically learn ethics through contrast, understanding consequences, recognizing boundaries, and reflecting on mistakes. Choosing what's right often involves imagining what could go wrong if we acted otherwise. In the end, whether we see them as opposites that define each other or as independent principles, right and wrong remain deeply connected, shaping the way we navigate morality and meaning. What do we owe each other? Most people agree on at least one thing: we shouldn't intentionally harm one another. But beyond that, what do we really owe each other? At the simplest level, it begins with social obligations, the small, everyday actions that make community life possible. Things like waiting your turn in line, keeping noise down at night, or following traffic rules. These don't require close relationships, only mutual respect. They're about sharing space without making it harder for everyone else. The question grows more complex when fairness and responsibility come into play. Should those with more resources be expected to help those with less? Do we owe more to people in our own communities than to strangers across the globe? These aren't just abstract ideas. They show up in debates about taxes, healthcare, education, and even how we vote. Some philosophers argue that membership in a society carries built-in obligations. We owe each other safety, opportunity, and freedom simply because we live together. Others claim we owe nothing beyond avoiding harm. That responsibility begins only with personal choice. Proximity adds another layer. If someone collapses on the street in front of you, most people would say you have a duty to help. But what if the person is thousands of miles away? Does the obligation weaken with distance? Or does technology, by connecting us more closely, erase that distinction? Ultimately, asking what we owe each other is less about theory and more about how we live together. It shapes everything from personal behavior to national policy. And while no single answer satisfies everyone, the very act of asking reveals how deeply we rely on one another, often in ways we don't fully realize. Do intentions matter more than outcomes? If someone means well, but their actions make things worse, should we still value their good intentions? Or do the results matter more? This is the core of the debate between intentions and outcomes. Intentions reveal motive. They explain why someone acted in the first place. If a driver runs a red light to rush a person to the hospital, their goal is to save a life, not to break the law. In ethics, motives often carry weight. People tend to judge actions more kindly when they stem from honest or compassionate reasons. Outcomes, on the other hand, reveal impact. A noble motive doesn't guarantee a good result. If a doctor prescribes medicine with the hope of healing but it harms the patient, the effect still matters, regardless of the doctor's sincerity. Different moral frameworks emphasize different sides. Some place morality in the intention itself, arguing that acting from duty or principle is what counts, no matter the outcome. Others argue the opposite. If an action causes harm, it's wrong, even if the harm was unintentional. In practice, both factors are usually considered. Courts, for example, weigh intent when judging crimes. An accident isn't punished the same as deliberate harm. But they also measure outcomes, especially when consequences are severe. Intentions reflect character. Outcomes reflect reality. The challenge is that they don't always align. Someone may mean well and still cause harm, or achieve good by accident. That's why moral judgment often requires a balance, understanding what someone aimed for while also acknowledging the real effects of their actions. Why do we dream? When we fall asleep, our brains don't simply switch off, they shift into a different mode, and dreams emerge as one of the most mysterious parts of that process. Dreaming usually happens during REM sleep, rapid eye movement, a stage where brain activity becomes more active, almost resembling wakefulness. In this phase, we experience vivid images, stories, and emotions we call dreams. But why do we dream? One leading idea is that dreams help us process information. Each day, we absorb huge amounts of input: faces, conversations, problems, worries, and the brain needs to sort, store, or discard it. Dreams may be the byproduct of this cleanup, where important connections are strengthened and irrelevant ones are pruned, sometimes mixing memories and emotions into strange dream scenarios. Another theory suggests that dreams act as a kind of simulation. Much like a pilot uses a flight simulator, our brains may use dreams to rehearse challenges, danger, conflict, or social situations, helping us practice emotional and behavioral responses, even if the scenarios feel bizarre. Some researchers also argue that dreams help regulate mood. After a stressful day, waking up feeling more balanced might be the result of emotional processing that took place during sleep. There's no single explanation that covers it all. Dreams likely serve multiple functions. What we do know is that dreaming isn't just meaningless brain noise. It's a built-in part of how the mind works. Messy, mysterious, and deeply connected to memory, emotion, and learning. What is freedom? Freedom is often thought of as doing what you want, when you want. But the concept is deeper and more complex than it first appears. At its core, freedom usually means the absence of restrictions, when no one is forcing, limiting, or controlling your choices. This is known as negative freedom, freedom from interference. Examples include being able to speak openly without censorship or move around without being detained. But there's also positive freedom, which is about having the real ability to pursue what matters to you. It's not just about having options, but having the resources, knowledge, or opportunities to make use of them. For instance, you might be free in theory to become a doctor, but without access to education, that freedom isn't meaningful. Freedom can also be internal. Even without external barriers, things like fear, addiction, or self-doubt can hold you back. In this sense, the obstacle isn't outside, it's within. Some philosophers argue that true freedom comes from self-awareness and making choices you genuinely stand behind. Then there's the balance between personal freedom and living in society. Absolute freedom can't exist without limits, because one person's freedom may interfere with another's. That's why we often trade a bit of individual freedom for shared rules, safety, and fairness. Ultimately, freedom isn't a single idea. It's a balance between independence, opportunity, self-understanding, and cooperation. Depending on how you define it, freedom can be something you already possess, or something you're still striving to achieve. What is hope? Hope is what helps people endure uncertainty, difficulty, or situations beyond their control. It isn't a guarantee, but a belief that something better might still happen, even without evidence. At its core, Hope is both an emotional and cognitive response to the unknown. To hope is to imagine a desirable future outcome, however uncertain. Even when the chances seem slim, the act of believing it's possible creates mental energy that encourages persistence, patience, and preparation. Unlike blind optimism, hope doesn't deny challenges. It often appears precisely when someone recognizes that things could go wrong, but chooses to focus on the chance that they won't. For instance, a person waiting for medical results may fully acknowledge the risks, yet still cling to the possibility of good news. That perspective doesn't erase fear, but it provides strength. Psychologists often connect hope to motivation and resilience. People who feel hopeful are more likely to set goals, try new approaches, and recover more quickly from setbacks. It's not just an emotion, it actively influences behavior. A student who hopes to pass an exam is more likely to study, not because success is certain, but because they believe it's still within reach. Hope also has a collective dimension. Communities often share hope in the face of hardship, whether rebuilding after disaster or standing together against injustice. In such cases, hope becomes a unifying force that inspires perseverance. In essence, hope isn't about certainty, it's about possibility.